How's it going, friends? And welcome back. Another video for you guys that I just kind of wanted to kind of touch base with. And of course, it's regarding the Google Pixel 10. But, I do want to make a little bit of a side note here. And that, I do get asked about other devices such as Poco, Vivo, and Huawei, and Honor. And here's the thing about it. When it comes to my channel, and I'm talking about my channel alone, not the other tech channels out there, but just mine. I tend to review and talk and discuss about things that's ready and accessible here in the US, as I am a US based content creator. So, I just talk about what you can easily walk into a Best Buy and grab, or you can easily go to a Verizon store, T-Mobile, AT&T, and finance, right? And a lot of these other devices that are great devices, right? You can look at all these other ones like, Huawei and Honor, etc., the ones that I named, and you can clearly see that, they have a lot going for them, but they're not ready and accessible here in the US. It's nothing against them. I'm not biased against them because I don't really have anything negative to really say about those devices. I just don't talk about them because it's not something that you can grab. And, me as a person, I would totally feel bad if like I, talked about, an Honor device or a Huawei device and it's not something that you could just grab right now, because there are some pretty cool ones that I wish I can get my hands on, but importing them is not practical for me. Maybe practical for some of you guys, but not for me. So hopefully that clears that up. But in today's video today, I wanted to talk about, because I've watched like tons of Pixel 10 reviews. I just keep watching them. I just keep seeing like, what's happening out there? Like, what's the thought process to a lot of people today? And let me tell you guys, like Pixels will always be stuck in that stigma. No matter what it does, it will never be as good as the other guys. It will never be as good as Apple, who's been doing it for a long time. So that's like the last resort in the argument of King of the Mountain. Because that's really what it's all about, right? When you have like a lot of different, fan bases just kind of debating on social media about which phone is the top of all of them for this current year, it's basically the battle of King of the Mountain. And now that we have all the players basically introduced, now comes the battle, and everyone just has their argumentative points. And what one thing I noticed when it comes to these these not arguments but debates, I'll tone it down a little bit. Debates. Pixel doesn't have a leg to stand on. And I'm not saying that because I'm saying that they're a disappointment. No, it's just it's the realization that I've noticed year after year after year after year. It's always that. It doesn't matter what Pixel does. There are always going to be people that try to find some reasoning to say that it's not worth you paying attention to or you taking a look at. They always prefer to direct you to Samsung or direct you to Apple. And I kind of wish that mentality would just stop already. It's pretty ridiculous, right? Like, let people kind of just like decide for themselves and quit trying to, be a shepherd that's leading the flock and herd them into the direction that you would most likely go to. It's such a crazy thing. I'm a user of the Pixel 10, right? And, first of all, shout out to those people who decided to go with the base model to review, because there are people out there who want to see a review on that and not necessarily the pro models, even though that's what everyone goes for, top of the line pro model. So 17, Pro, Pixel 10 Pro, Galaxy S25 Ultra, because they don't really have them. That's the only pro model they really have. So if you look at it in that context, and it's like this year there's two argumentative points that people make about the Pixel 10 Pro. One of them being the cameras, the other one being the GPU. Why the GPU? Some people will ask. We'll get into that because that one to me is just a little bit more weirder than anything. But let's talk about cameras first. So that's one of the big things that people kind of talk about is like the cameras, and they're always like, it's a downgrade. They downgraded. And I'm like, where did they downgrade, specifically? That is so detrimental to just how photography with the Pixel 10 Pro is. For case point, basically I have it up here, and let's just full screen it so you guys can see. But when you look at the Pixel 9 Pro on the left, the Pixel 10 Pro in the middle, and I even threw in the Pixel 10 just for aesthetics on the far right. Okay, so when you look at the 9 Pro versus the 10 Pro, a lot of its main features highlighted is identical, right? 50 megapixel octa PD wide camera, same goes on the Pixel 10 Pro. 48 megapixel quad PD ultra wide camera, same as the 10 Pro. And then you look at the 9 Pro's 48 megapixel telephoto, and you look at the 10 Pro, pretty much the same. Same field of view, right? On the telephotos, on the ultra wides, and even on the main wide angle. Same. Aperture, same. So where's the difference? Where's the downgrade that the people are... Now I can see on the Pixel 10, okay? Because if we were to just literally go and take the 9 Pro and just drop to the 9, okay? Now you're seeing a difference between the 9 on the far left and the 10 on the far right. 50 megapixel main wide angle shooter versus a 48 megapixel, right? And then of course the aperture rating, f 1.68 aperture on the Pixel 9, f 1.7 aperture on the Pixel 10. And then if you go to the ultra wide, okay, 48 megapixel ultra wide on the Pixel 9, 13 megapixel ultra wide on the Pixel 10, 123 degree field of view on the Pixel 9, 120 degree field of view on the Pixel 10, f 1.7 aperture on the Pixel 9, f 2.2 aperture on the Pixel 10. No telephoto on the Pixel 9, and a 10.8 megapixel telephoto on the Pixel 10. So there you see a difference. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because, you know, when there's reviews and they talk about the cameras, they talk about the cameras in such a sense where it's just like they downgraded. And like in the video, they're holding up a Pixel 10 Pro, and then they're like, they downgraded from the Pixel 9 Pro, and it's just like, wait a minute, you know, where? Now, I'm sure there is small, subtle differences between the Pixel 9 Pro and the Pixel 10 Pro when it comes to their cameras, and you got to go down into the nitty-gritty specifications of it in order to find those differences. And by right, there should be some differences. Now, if the Pixel 9 Pro is better in some degree than the Pixel 10 Pro, does that make it detrimental? Absolutely not. It does not make it detrimental at all. Okay, we tend to see this happen. We've seen where an older Pixel device has something more powerful than a newer Pixel device, and we're left questioning, why did they do this? Did it turn out to be an absolute failure? No. All right, I'm gonna call it for what it is. It's not a failure. The next up argument is the GPU. Okay, people are talking about the GPU in the Pixel 10 series. People are just like, oh my God, you know, they throttled the GPU. It can go up to, you know, 1.1 gigahertz, but it's throttled to 400 megahertz. And why do they do this? You know, it affects gaming, it affects gaming, it affects gaming. And it's so weird that people have to take to social media and just basically just state that they're not heavy gamers, or they don't really even care about gaming. You know, on the average day use using the Pixel 10, and I'm using the base Pixel 10, and I don't see a major hindrance because they've throttled the GPU. I'm not a heavy gamer, so I can't resonate with all of you out there who game heavily on it. I'm not saying like, oh, you should just excuse it and get the Pixel 10. I really don't care what phone you buy, but I do feel like that it, you know, it's kind of unjustified for people to just try to convince the herd to just only go with this option or only go with that option just because of something that you don't like. That is a very, very small. It's very small on the whole retrospective things. It's very small that, you know, the GPU is throttled. Is it going to cause issues where your phone's just unusable? Because that's what they make it out to be. They make it seem like because the GPU is throttled, your Facebook won't load, and your YouTube will not play video, and you know, your video calling will just be absolutely trash. And that's furthest from the case. I use Google Meets, I video call. That's my primary method of calling my family, is through video call. It's just, I don't know. I don't care if people don't use it and they rather use the archaic, you know, regular, you know, phone calls. To talk to family, I use video calling because I like to see my family. And so that's like my primary way of like, calling. And if, my kids want to call, but they don't want to be on video, they just do a Google Meets audio call and it goes through. No phone number to have to remember, no phone number to make sure I dialed correctly or that's dialed correctly into the contacts, in case none of that. This is just basically video calling. Now, when I call businesses and stuff like that, I use regular phone calls. That's how I know the difference of who's calling me. If it's a Google Meets ring, it's family or close friends. If it's a regular phone call, possibly business or spam. And with the video calls, it's not detrimental. Everything's crisp and clear. I see my dad just fine. He sees me just fine. We're golden. So, the GPU thing obviously became a reasoning point when somebody posted a video on Reddit talking about that they couldn't play Genshin Impact. And then all of a sudden there was this Genshin Impact craze about the Pixel 10. And then a lot of other tech creators were taking to social media to play Genshin Impact and record themselves doing it. And now they're, trying to confirm that there is a problem playing Genshin Impact on the Pixel 10s, or if that was just like a one-person issue that tend to just affect that one person and not everybody. And of course, publications ran real quick, to just put out content for everyone to read, and then come to find out it wasn't something specific, to all Pixel 10s, just that one person. And this is the type of thing that I find that's just so laughable and so funny. And the reason why that I say that, when it comes to the Pixel 10s, why they never really, not Pixel 10s, but just Pixels in general, that why they won't ever get a break, it's just that is. If Apple was to make these same mistakes that the Pixels have, it would be given a pass. I know this. I watched closely to the tech space for so many years, and whether they want to admit it or deny it, that's exactly what happens. Pixel does it, bad, bad, bad. Apple does it, it's okay. It's livable. We can deal with it. Same with Samsung. Pixel does it, mistake, bad, 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 bad. Samsung does it, yeah, but I could zoom into the moon and see an alien eating cheese looking at Earth. You see what I'm saying? Passes are given. There's a biased play. The biased play is like, and it comes down to it. Well, Pixels haven't been around long enough, like the Galaxies and the iPhones. I remember before the Pixels was around, it was Nexus. Nexus was around. Nexus was doing its thing. And, Nexus was really just Google basically using another OEM for creating hardware to house their latest new operating system of Android. That's what it was. That's what the program was definitely all about. And, now that they have their own lineup of hardware known as Pixel, and then it's just like, well, you started late to the game. So this is like a race that, no matter what Pixel does, in the eyes of those, it never gains any ground to catch up to Apple, to catch up to Samsung, or even surpass them. The race is rigged, and I'm calling it for what it is. The race is rigged. Pixel cannot catch up no matter what. And it's not because that they can't themselves. It's because the limitations are placed by a lot of people in the tech community who tend to just nitpick everything that Pixel does, but hand out passes to what Samsung and Apple does. And I think that's totally weird and very irresponsible, especially if you call yourself a tech creator. And I said it.